Jack Sullivan believed he had prepared for every possible scenario. In a workday, but not for this. The glass skyscraper in downtown Seattle shimmered in the morning sun, and on the top floor, Jack's office was its own kingdom, cold, pristine, and commanding. His desk gleamed, financial reports lined up like chess pieces in a game he always won. Then, at precisely 8:17 a.m., the unimaginable happened. A rushed knock at the door from his assistant made him glance up. She looked uneasy, hesitating mid-sentence. "Mr. Sullivan, there's a little girl asking to see you." A little girl, Jack frowned. Whose daughter? She didn't say, but she's holding a piece of paper and said, "She's here for a job." Before Jack could respond, the door opened. A small girl, maybe 6 years old, stepped into the room like she belonged there. Her brown hair was slightly messy, her red sweater faded, her sneakers worn. A dark little backpack clung to her shoulders. In her hands, she held a piece of paper wrinkled, creased at the corners. But grasped with both hands like something sacred, she walked straight to his desk, stopped, looked him in the eyes, and said with calm clarity, "I need a job." No tremble, no fear, no plea. Jack, a man who'd heard 1,000 million pitches, suddenly felt unprepared. He stared at the girl, struggling to comprehend this moment. The office fell silent. The keystrokes outside, the waiting conference calls, the untouched espresso all ceased to matter. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softening. "Lily," she answered. "Lily Brooks." Jack leaned forward and gently took the paper. From her hands, it was a resume handwritten in crayon, with uneven lines. "I can clean. I'm quiet. I won't cry in front of people. I will learn, please." A small star and a shaky heart were drawn in the corner. He looked back at Lily. Her deep brown eyes were calm, but held a weight beyond her years. Her seriousness wasn't something she'd been taught, it was something she had earned. "Did you come here alone?" "Yes, I know you're the top person. I read your name in the paper. I thought, if anyone could help, it'd be you." Jack leaned back, still holding the child's crayon-written plea. A strange, almost forgotten feeling stirred in his chest, something like emotion. Outside the glass windows, Seattle moved, as always. But inside that polished room, Jack Sullivan's world was shifting, cracked open by 5 words from a 6-year-old. "I need a job," and he knew this wasn't a joke. This was a cry for help. Jack set the resume down on his desk, but his eyes didn't leave the girl. The silence in the room felt thick, as if the world outside had paused, waiting for his next move. Lily stood still, unmoving like a tiny soldier in unfamiliar territory. But instead of fear, she carried something extraordinary, poise and quiet conviction, as if she had lived through more years than she'd been given. "What do you know about work?" Jack asked, not to test her, but to understand. "I can wipe tables, mop floors, carry things, pick up paper, and I don't bother people," Lily said without hesitation. "I won't cry. I promised my mum." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in her voice he couldn't look away from. It wasn't the voice of a child, it was the sound of someone who had learned to carry pain as part of life. "Where do you and your mum live?" "We used to live near Rainier Avenue, now. A small room in the shelter." Her voice remained steady, but her deep brown eyes flickered just for a second with something shadowed and sad. Jack said nothing for a moment. He thought of his own childhood. He had known hardship, had seen his mother work 2 jobs, but he had never stood in front of a CEO asking for work. He had never been forced to grow up this fast. "What about your dad?" he asked, knowing he was stepping into delicate territory. Lily shook her head. "I've never met him." Silence stretched between them. Jack glanced down at the resume again each line, a desperate cry for hope. "I can clean, I will learn." And finally, "Please, no big words, no strategy." Yet it moved him more than any pitch he'd ever heard. "Lily," he said gently, "you don't need a job, you need help." She frowned, as if no one had ever said that to her before. "I need to help my mum. She's dying." This time, Jack had no immediate answer. He'd read hundreds of desperate please emails, letters, donation requests, but no one had ever said it to him like Lily did. No tears, no drama, just the truth the doctors said. No insurance, no more treatment. "Where is she?" Jack asked, his voice suddenly heavy. "Mercy Clinic. Room 12. A dull thump echoed in his chest. Mercy, one of the very community clinics his company had quietly supported, but he had never stepped foot in one. Never imagined that someone would come straight to him from there with no options left. Jack stood up. He walked to the window and looked down at the city. A sea of people moved beneath the morning light, unaware that just a few floors above, his world was shifting. "Can you take me to see her?" Lily nodded. "I think she like you." Jack turned, slipped on his coat, and carefully folded the crayon résumé into his inner pocket. Not for protocol, but because he knew this wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the most powerful message he had ever received. That sometimes a CEO doesn't need to hear a perfect plan. He needs to listen to a tiny heart pounding with love. He opened the door. "Let's go, Lily." And as they stepped out of that glass-walled office, Seattle's most powerful man holding hands with a 6-year-old girl, Jack Sullivan knew that today he wouldn't be attending meetings. Today he had a more important appointment with a mother waiting in pain, and with a little girl who had just taught him what truly matters. This was a cry for help. The ride to Mercy Clinic felt longer than it should have, not because of distance, but because of weight. Jack Sullivan sat in the back seat of his sleek company car, his coat folded beside him, the crayon resume safely tucked in his inner pocket. Beside him sat Lily, small and quiet, her legs barely reaching the edge of the seat, her backpack clutched tightly in her lap like it held her whole world. She wasn't crying. She didn't fidget. She just stared out the window, watching the passing streets with eyes too still for someone her age. Jack had made 100 trips through the city, chasing deals, investors, expansion, but this was different. This wasn't about what he could build. This was about what he could save. He glanced at Lily. "Do you visit her every day?" She nodded without looking at him. "After school, I bring her crackers if I get any." Jack swallowed hard. There was no bitterness in her tone, no just routine. "How long has she been there?" 3 weeks. She used to be at home, but when she fainted and couldn't wake up, they took her in an ambulance. They let her stay for now. He didn't ask how she got to school, or how she ate, or who tucked her in. He already knew the answer. No one. They pulled up outside the Clinica plane, aging brick building tucked between 2 shuttered storefronts. A place Jack had passed 100 times but never entered. Lily opened the door before the driver could step out. "Come on," she said, not commanding but certain. Inside, the air smelled like antiseptic and old paint. The receptionist barely looked up until she saw Jack. His presence, tailored coat and all, didn't fit here, but Lily did. She walked with quiet purpose, her steps familiar with the place. "Room 12. she said to the nurse at the front desk. "She's my mum, Jack." Followed her down a narrow hallway. The linoleum cracked and walls faded. Every detail screamed budget cuts and forgotten corners of a system too overwhelmed to care. When they reached the room, Lily paused. Her small hand rested on the door handle. "She sleeps a lot," she said. "Sometimes I talk to her, and she doesn't wake up. But I think she hears me." Jack nodded slowly. "Then let's talk to her." She pushed the door open. The room was dim, lit only by a small window with blinds half drawn. A woman lay in the hospital bed frail, pale, her hair clinging to her forehead in damp strands. Machines hummed steadily, tracking breath, pressure, heartbeat. Her hands were thin, resting on the blanket like paper. "Mum," Lily whispered. Stepping to the side of the bed, "I brought someone." Jack stood frozen in the doorway. This was Rachel Brooks. This was the woman Lily wanted to save with elbow grease and crayon, please. She looked exhausted, but peaceful, like someone who had run out of strength, not out of hope. Lily took her mother's hand and held it gently. "This is Mr. Sullivan. He came to help." Jack stepped forward, unsure of what to say. He wasn't used to being speechless. I met your daughter today," he began, softly, "and I don't think I'll ever be the same." The machines beeped. The room didn't answer. But something shifted in him, a quiet knowing that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. "She used to be a nurse," Lily said suddenly. "She helped people all the time. But when she got sick, no one helped her." Jack looked at her, this little girl who had walked into a boardroom with nothing but courage, and Crayon realized this wasn't charity. This was justice. "I'm going to help her now," he said firmly. "I promise." The nurse stepped in to check vitals. Her eyes flicked to Jack, surprised but didn't question. She told him, in hushed tones, that Rachel's condition was stable but declining. Without advanced treatment, it wouldn't hold, and the clinic couldn't afford to keep her much longer. Jack didn't hesitate. He stepped into the hallway and pulled out his phone to first call to his private physician. "I need a full review of a patient at Mercy Clinic. Her name is Rachel Brooks. Get her transferred to a private facility today." The second, to his legal team. "Set up a private fund, anonymous, no questions asked. Cover everything: treatment, housing, support, whatever they need." When he returned to the room, Lily was sitting beside her mother, her head resting against Rachel's shoulder. Her eyes fluttered with fatigue, but when she saw Jack, she sat up. "Are you really going to help?" Jack reached for her hand. "Yes," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." He meant it, and he didn't even realize, in that moment, that this wasn't just the beginning of Rachel's second chance. It was the beginning of his own. Jack Sullivan had closed billion-dollar deals in less time than it took to arrange what he was doing now by noon. Rachel Brooks was being moved, not to another ward, but to an entirely different world. A private hospital on the edge of Capitol Hill, known for its quiet dignity and advanced care. The transfer required medical clearance, legal coordination, and a dozen back-channel approvals. Normally, that would take days. Jack made it happen in 3 hours, because this time he wasn't waiting on paperwork. He was moving for Lily. He insisted on riding in the private ambulance. No aides, no security. Just him, Lily, and Rachel, who lay unconscious under layers of warm blankets. Her breathing steady but slow, Lily never let go of her mother's hand. She sat beside the stretcher, her small frame dwarfed by medical equipment, her eyes watching everything. When the ride began, she spoke only once to Jack. "Will it hurt her to move?" He shook his head. "They'll be gentle. She won't feel it." Lily nodded and stayed quiet, her fingers clutching the thin wrist beside her. Jack glanced at her from across the vehicle and felt something strange and humbling stir inside him. She didn't ask questions. She didn't ask for guarantees. She asked if her mum would be okay right now, not later, not someday, because children like Lily didn't dream in years. They hoped in hours. At the hospital, a team of specialists was waiting. Jack had seen medical briefings prepared for dignitaries that didn't look this thorough. Every detail had been handled. A private suite, pediatric accommodations for Lily, nutritionists, oncologists, palliative care summoned by a single man's word. But Jack wasn't thinking about the power he was using. He was thinking about the cost of not using it. Rachel was wheeled into a sunlit room on the 3rd floor. Lily followed, her small steps quick and quiet, as if afraid to disturb the hope in the air. The new room smelled like clean linen and lavender oil. A fresh bouquet of sunflowers had been placed on the windowsill. "This is her room now?" Lily asked. Jack nodded. "Yes, until she's better." Lily walked to the side of the bed and opened her backpack. She pulled out a crumpled drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands. One had long hair, one had a ponytail, one had square shoulders, and a tie. She placed it gently on the bedside table. "That's us," she said. "So she knows." The nurse checked vitals. Jack stepped into the hallway to take a call from his physician, who confirmed the early diagnosis but added a note of cautious optimism. "If she responds to treatment," the doctor said, "we may be able to stabilize her within the week." "Then do it," Jack replied, "whatever she needs." When he returned, Lily was curled up in the lounge outside the room, sipping cocoa from a paper cup. Her legs swung beneath the oversized chair. Her sweater was too big, but someone had brushed her hair, and for the first time she looked her age. Jack sat beside her. "She's still sleeping," Lily said, "but I think maybe she's not tired the same way anymore." Jack didn't speak. He just nodded. That night, as the city quieted, Jack remained at the hospital. No calls, number meetings, no spreadsheets, just him, Lily, and the steady rhythm of Rachel's breathing, and somewhere between the whir of machines and the soft hum of hope. Jack Sullivan made a vow just to fund the fight for a woman's life, but to show up every single day for the little girl who had reminded him what being human meant. The 5th day began in silence, the kind that suffocates, but the kind that hums with possibility. Jack arrived at the hospital just after sunrise. The morning air clung to his coat, and the coffee in his hand had already gone cold, but he didn't notice. His eyes were fixed ahead, his steps swift yet grounded. He no longer needed a reason to be there. He just was. At the reception desk, the nurses greeted him, not with surprise anymore, but familiarity. She had a stable night. One of them said, "Vitals are holding." He nodded and made his way up to the 3rd floor. In Rachel's room, the light was soft and golden. Machines still beeped and whispered, but the tension that had once gripped the air had eased. There was something different, now subtle, but undeniable. Lily sat by her mother's bedside, her hands gently folding a paper flower. She looked up as Jack entered and gave a small smile, the kind that made the weight of the world feel suddenly worth it. "She squeezed my hand today," she whispered, "just a little." Jack moved closer, watching the way Rachel's fingers twitched faintly. Under the blanket, it wasn't much, but it was something. And in moments like this, something was everything. He knelt beside Lily. "Did you tell her anything?" She nodded. "I told her about the new room, and the flowers, and you." Jack smiled. "What did you say about me?" "That you're not scary like I thought," she said, "and that you came back. That's the important part." Those words landed with more force than any boardroom verdict he'd ever heard. You came back. Later that morning, Jack met with the lead physician in a quiet consultation room. Charts lined the wall, each one mapping a fragile path toward stability. Rachel was responding to the new treatment. Her oxygen levels had risen. Her blood pressure was leveling. Her body was, at last, beginning to fight. "She's not out of the woods," the doctor cautioned, "but she's walking toward the edge." Jack nodded. "We'll walk with her." The rest of the day passed in a blur of updates and quiet moments. Jack personally ensured Lily had a cot near the pediatric wing and brought her a sketch pad, noticing how she'd been drawing on scraps of medical paper. The nurse found her a clean set of clothes, and she changed into a soft sweater with tiny stars along the sleeves. She looked, lighter dots, still solemn, still serious, but less guarded, as if she no longer had to carry every burden by herself. In the afternoon, Jack took her to the hospital's small rooftop garden. It wasn't grand, just a few benches and a handful of flowers fighting for light, but Lily ran ahead, spinning once beneath the open sky. She paused at a fountain and dipped her fingers into the cool water. Jack watched her closely, not as a protector, not as a rescuer, but as someone who had been rescued. She turned and handed him a folded drawing from her pocket. "Made it last night," she said. "For you." He opened it slowly. 3 figures again. But this time, the man in the suit had a smile that stretched across the page. Lily stood beside him, her hand in his, and next to them Rachel, standing tall, a flower in her hair. "You're part of us now," Lily said. Jack blinked hard and tucked the drawing into his coat. "I want to be," he said. "Not just today. Always." That evening, as Rachel lay resting, Jack read aloud from one of Lily's favorite books, the kind she said her mum used to read when she couldn't sleep. His voice was low, warm, unfamiliar to even himself. Lily curled up at his side, head resting against his arm, and for the first time in a long while, Jack didn't feel like a man climbing. He felt like a man arriving as the city below glowed. In twilight, and monitors hummed in gentle rhythm, Jack whispered into the quiet room, not to anyone, really, but to the part of himself that had almost forgotten, "We're not done. We're just getting started." Morning at the hospital broke slowly, sunlight spilling across polished floors and bleached white sheets. But in room 312, time was holding its breath. Lily stood by her mother's bed like she did every day, hands folded, backpack at her feet, her eyes quietly measuring the rise and fall of Rachel's chest. She'd learned to read the subtle signs, the slight twitch of a finger, the deeper pull of breath. Each movement mattered. Each pause meant something. Today, something was different. Jack had arrived earlier than usual, carrying 2 cups of cocoa and a bag of warm pastries from the same corner bakery he'd passed for years without noticing. Now he knew the owner by name. He knew Lily liked blueberry muffins best. He stepped into the pediatric lounge and found her curled up with a book, legs tucked under her. She looked up. She moved again, twice. Jack smiled. "Then we better get in there." Together, they walked to Rachel's room, now familiar, yet sacred. The nurses had added a vase of fresh tulips by the window. One had bloomed fully overnight. Lily stepped to the bedside and took Rachel's hand. Jack waited, and then it happened. A twitch, a flutter. The slow, deliberate blink of eyelids opening. Rachel's eyes searched the ceiling, first glassy, unsure. Then they drifted, left, toward Lily. "Mum." Lily whispered, breath hitching. "It's me. I'm here." Rachel blinked again, her lips parted. No sound at first. Then soft, scratchy, but undeniable came one word: Lily. Jack felt his knees weaken. In all the years he had measured success by numbers and noise, he had never experienced anything as powerful as that whisper. Lily broke into tears, quiet but full of joy. "You came back," she said, pressing her forehead to her mother's hand. Rachel's gaze flickered again, this time to Jack. She didn't know his name, not yet, but something in her eyes said she understood. She understood someone had been there, that her daughter had not been alone. The room filled quickly, nurses, monitors, urgency, but Jack stayed exactly where he was, his eyes locked on the woman who had silently changed everything after the medical checks and readings. Rachel turned to him, voice barely audible. "You stayed?" Jack nodded. "I didn't ask. You didn't have to," he said. "Lily did." Lily sat on the edge of the bed now, her hand gently brushing her mother's hair back. "I brought him. I thought you'd like him." Rachel smiled, weakly, fragile, but real. "She's always been stubborn," she whispered. "That's what saved you," Jack said quietly. "That, and a red sweater." Later that afternoon, as the hospital quieted, Jack sat outside in the garden courtyard with Lily. The sun was setting behind a row of rooftops, and the air smelled faintly of jasmine. "She said my name," Lily said, clutching her cocoa like a secret. "That means she's still mine." Jack looked at her with more pride than he had ever given a CEO or investor. "She never stopped being yours. She was just finding her way back." Lily tilted her head. "You helped her." Jack didn't answer right away. He looked out at the sky, then back at the girl who had walked into his office and changed everything. "You helped me." Night fell. Lily tucked into a cot beside her mother. Jack sat in a chair just outside the room, watching the soft glow of monitors. He wasn't just an observer anymore. He was part of the story. And that night, he didn't check his phone once, because the only update he needed was happening one breath at a time. Behind that hospital room door, the seventh day began with laughter. Not loud, not long, just a soft, almost shy chuckle from Rachel as she watched Lily tell a story about cocoa that was too hot, muffins that were too soft, and Jack, who had accidentally sat on a crayon drawing. Without realizing, Jack stood nearby, stunned by the sound. He hadn't heard it before, not from her. It was fragile, like it hadn't been used in a while. But it was real. Rachel was getting stronger. That morning, she sat upright for the first time without help. Her voice was still faint, but it carried. She asked for water, then for Lily, and then pointing gently to Jack. "Who's that?" Lily grinned, almost proudly. "That's Jack. He's helping us." Rachel's eyes studied him, not with suspicion, but with the quiet curiosity of someone re-entering the world. "Why?" Jack stepped forward, suddenly unsure of the answer. "Because you needed help, and you just showed up." "Yes," he said, "because Lily asked." Rachel's gaze held his for a long moment. Then, simply, she said, "Thank you." He didn't know how to respond. Gratitude felt too small for what they had shared in silence all week. But he nodded. "You don't have to thank me. You raised her. That was enough." Later that afternoon, while Rachel slept again, a woman named Mara appeared, a social worker with calm eyes and a professional folder under her arm. She had met Jack briefly on the day of the hospital transfer, but now came for a more formal reason. She wanted to talk about next steps in the family room across the hall. While Lily sat on a beanbag drawing flowers in her notebook, Mara opened her file. "You've done more than we usually see," she said. "Most people donate. They don't stay." Jack looked at her, his face unreadable. "This isn't charity." She nodded, reading something in his tone. "Then I'll be direct. Should anything happen again, should Rachel's condition worsen, would you consider becoming Lily's legal guardian?" The question landed with a weight Jack hadn't prepared for. He thought of boardroom proposals, of deals that reshaped cities. But nothing had ever stopped him like this. Would he become her guardian? He looked through the glass door at Lily, sitting peacefully, unaware of the question that might define the rest of both their lives. He saw her backpack beside her. It seemed frayed, but carefully zipped. He saw her tiny shoes beside the chair. And then he saw the drawing on her lap, one that showed 3 figures again. This time, they stood in front of a house, arms linked. Jack spoke slowly. "I didn't plan this. None of it." Mara waited. Patient, but yes, he said. "If she ever needed someone, I'd be there." That evening, Jack and Lily returned to Rachel's room. She was awake, a little more color in her cheeks. Her eyes lit up at the sight of her daughter. "Someone wants to show you something," Jack said gently. Lily climbed onto the side of the bed, careful of the wires and tubes. She held up the drawing. "This is us," she said. "You, me, and Jack. I gave you flowers because you're getting better." Rachel took the picture with trembling hands. Her eyes filled not with fear or exhaustion, but with gratitude. So deep it couldn't be spoken. "You gave us something we didn't even know we needed," she whispered to Jack. "Thank you for seeing her, for hearing her." Jack sat down beside them, no longer the visitor, no longer the outsider. "I should be thanking you," he said. "She reminded me who I used to be." That night, the 3 of them shared a small dinner in the hospital lounge. The food was microwaved and served on paper trays. But to Lily, it was a feast. She told jokes. Rachel laughed. Jack listened like every word was worth its weight in gold. As he tucked Lily into the small bed beside her mother, she looked up at him sleepily. "Do you think things will stay like this?" Jack thought for a long moment. "No," he said. "Not exactly. Life's not easy." She nodded. "But I'll be here," he added. "We'll get through it together." Lily reached for his hand. "I'm glad I came to your office." Jack squeezed it gently. "So am I," he whispered. "You changed everything." And that night, as the world outside spun unfueled by noise, numbers, and people too busy to look down, one man remained seated beside a hospital bed, holding on to something finally real. Not wealth, not status, but something that, for the first time in years, made him feel whole. By the 8th morning, the hospital room didn't feel like a place of endings anymore. It felt like the first page of something brand new. Rachel was sitting up straighter now, the color slowly returning to her face. Her voice had grown stronger, steadier. She asked for books. She asked for real food. She asked for Lily, and not just with her eyes, but with her arms outstretched. Jack watched it all like someone who'd just learned how to breathe again. He still arrived before sunrise, with cocoa and a muffin. But now, Lily met him in the hallway with stories about the drawing she finished, the flower that opened overnight, the nurse who braided her hair. Jack found himself listening like a father might, not out of duty, but with genuine hunger to understand her world. That morning, Rachel managed to sit unaided and feed herself oatmeal. Lily fed her the first few bites, giggling when she said it was too sweet. "You never liked sugar before," Lily teased. "Maybe the hospital rewired my taste buds," Rachel replied, her voice light but sincere. Jack stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed but face open. Rachel looked at him. "You've been here every day." He nodded. "And I'm not going anywhere." A quiet moment passed before she asked, "Why?" Jack didn't hesitate. "Because when Lily walked into my office, she reminded me what it means to matter to someone." Later that day, a hospital administrator handed Jack the first recovery timeline. If Rachel's health continued improving, she could move to a rehabilitation suite within the week. Full release was still months away, but it was no longer an impossible dream. Hope had returned, not loud, not dramatic, but rooted like a tree. That afternoon, Jack took Lily to the hospital's children's library, a small sunlit room filled with battered books and crayon-colored walls. She wandered quietly before pulling a picture book from the shelf. "Do you think we'll still be together after she gets better?" she asked suddenly. Jack knelt beside her. "That's up to you too." She paused. "What if we didn't have to go back to the shelter?" Jack swallowed hard. The question wasn't new, but hearing it from her, in a voice full of dreams instead of dread, made it feel holy. "What if," he said, "we built something new?" That evening, Jack sat in his office for the first time in a week. But he wasn't reviewing stock reports. He was scanning rental agreements and floor plans. One in particular stood out: a corner unit in a quiet neighborhood near the botanical gardens. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, bright windows, enough space for art projects and bedtime stories. By the next morning, the unit was being prepped. Furniture would arrive in days. A small desk was added because Jack had seen Lily sketching on hospital trays and knew she needed a place that said, "This is yours." Back at the hospital, Rachel noticed the shift in the air. "You've made plans," she said as Jack entered. "Yes," he replied gently. "For after," he nodded. "For all of us." Rachel turned toward the window, the late sunlight painting her face with gold. "We've never had stability," she said. "I didn't know how much I missed the feeling of being seen, of knowing someone won't walk away." Jack sat beside her bed. "Then let's build that feeling into walls. Let's make it real." That night, Lily drew another picture. 3 figures again. But now, a house stood behind them. The sun above, flowers below, and written in careful, slanted letters, "Home, when." She showed it to Rachel. Her mother pulled her close and whispered, "We're going to be okay." And for the first time, Lily didn't just hope it was true. She believed it. 3 days later, the rain in Seattle had softened to a drizzle, just enough to paint the sidewalks in light and reflections. Jack stood at the entrance of the apartment building. He'd purchased 5 years ago, but never once visited. It had always been an investment property. Today, it was something else entirely. Today, it was theirs. Inside, the elevator chimed open to the 4th floor. Jack led the way down a warm, sunlit hallway. The paint was fresh. The smell of clean linen hung in the air. Behind him, Lily's footsteps tapped lightly. Her hand wrapped around Rachel's. Rachel still moved slowly, leaning on a walker for support, but her steps were steady. She had traded the hospital gown for jeans, a cardigan, and strength earned the hard way. They stopped at the last door. Apartment 4D. Jack pulled the key from his coat pocket. The same coat where Lily's crayon resume still rested, folded and worn but never discarded. He turned to them. I thought, maybe you'd like to open it together. Lily looked up at her mother, then at Jack. Her fingers closed around the key, together. Their hands turned to the lock. The door opened to a modest but beautiful apartment. 2 bedrooms, a small living room with warm light pouring through wide windows. The scent of pine and new beginnings. Rachel gasped softly. Is this? It's yours, Jack said. Lily wandered in, her eyes wide, her backpack falling to the floor as she rushed to the window. We can see the gardens. In the corner, a small desk sat beside a shelf stacked with sketchbooks, colored pencils, and a framed photo of the 3 of them taken just 2 days earlier by a nurse who had said, "You'll want this one." Rachel stepped farther inside, slowly. Her eyes landed on the bed made with soft grey sheets, the table set with 3 place settings, the couch just big enough for movie nights. "I've never had this," she whispered. Jack nodded. "Neither have I." They settled in quietly. That afternoon, no celebration, no grand tour, just small, sacred acts. Lily placing her drawings on the fridge, Rachel folding her sweater and putting it in a real drawer. Jack helping set up a teapot in the kitchen he'd never imagined using. Later, as the sun dipped low, Jack found himself sitting on the floor beside Lily's new desk. She handed him a fresh drawing, this one, different dot. Not stick figures, but shapes, boxes. Labeled, safety, quiet, love, someone who stays. "What's this?" he asked. She pointed. "That's our house. That's what's in it." Jack's voice nearly cracked. "And what's that one?" he asked, pointing to the smallest box tucked in the corner. "That's you," she said. "Me. Because everything else fits around you." That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, wrapped in soft blankets, breathing peacefully in a room of her own, Rachel and Jack stood by the kitchen window, sipping tea. "I still don't know what to call this," Rachel said. "What we are." Jack looked down at the sleeping city. "Maybe that's the point. We don't have to name it to know it's real." Rachel turned to him. "You could have walked away." "I did," Jack said. "From a lot of things, for a long time. And now," he looked at her, quiet and sure, "now I stay." 1 month later, Seattle bloomed in spring. Outside, the air smelled like rain and fresh soil. Inside apartment 4D, Lily sat at her desk, head bent over a piece of paper, tongue poking out slightly in concentration. She wasn't drawing this time. She was writing. It was a letter meant for no one in particular. Or maybe for everyone. Jack stood in the kitchen, pouring hot water into 2 mugs. He watched her from a distance, not wanting to interrupt. Rachel was resting in the bedroom. She'd started walking without the aid of a walker now. Some days were hard, but none were hopeless anymore. When Lily finished, she folded the letter carefully and slid it into a small envelope. She looked up at Jack. "Do you want to read it?" He hesitated, then nodded. She handed him the envelope, but before he opened it, she said, "It's okay if you don't read it. I wrote it so I wouldn't forget." Jack sat down on the couch, unfolded the page, and read silently. "Dear someone, if you ever feel like you're alone, or like the world forgot you, I want you to know it didn't. I know, because I tried asking it for help, and no one answered. So I tried asking one person, and he did. He didn't have to, but he did. And now I live in a house with 2 bedrooms and a desk, and my mom has flowers by her bed, and she's laughing again, and someone stays. So if you're wondering if anyone will ever see you, just know that maybe they already are. Maybe they're just waiting for a little girl in a red sweater to walk through their door. Love, Lily. Jack didn't speak. He couldn't. He folded the letter and held it like something precious. Not because of the paper, because of what it had proven, that sometimes the most important thing you'll ever do is not leave. That staying, truly staying, was how healing began. That night, they didn't have a party, no big finale, number grand reveal, just a quiet dinner. Jack, Rachel, and Lily. The sound of forks against plates. Laughter that had taken time to learn again. A lamp glowing in the corner. The world still spinning outside. But in here, everything had changed. Later, after Lily fell asleep, Jack stepped onto the small balcony. The city stretched below him, vast and indifferent. But he wasn't afraid of it anymore. Rachel joined him, blanket around her shoulders. She told me what she wrote, she said. Jack nodded. It's more than a letter. It's a beginning, she replied. They stood in silence for a while, and then Rachel whispered, "She called you someone who stays." Jack's voice was soft. "She saved me with that." A pause. "You saved both of us." Jack turned. To her, "No, you saved each other. I just got lucky enough to be invited in." In the end, there was no miracle. Just people, just love, and a girl in a red sweater who walked into a glass-walled office with nothing but a crayon résumé and a heart too big to carry alone. And in doing so, she built something no company, no empire, no title ever could: a home.